everyone. My name is Melanie Miller. My pronouns are she, her. Amanda is going to be sharing the PowerPoint here in a second. All right, boom, there it is. So I'm going to start today by talking a little bit about me, just for context, because I think it's relevant. So again, I'm a third-year counseling psychology PhD student here. I'm also very student-facing. I'm an academic coach in transformative learning. I have been for 2 years. I work as a counselor at the University of Kentucky Counseling Center as a practicum intern. I had the honor of working with Amanda and Caroline last year in the Alumni Association as a career counseling intern. And what that means is I am very plugged in to the university. I also lab for some classes here and there. And what I've noticed in my time here is that how we talk about gender inclusivity and just gender and pronouns in general changes a lot depending on what department you're in. And it got me riled up, honestly. And this all started because I was complaining to Amanda in supervision last year just about my frustrations in life. And she said, well, you know, how are we doing? What can we do better to better include gender diverse people and just gender in general? And that's kind of where all of this started from. So I want to preface it through a very cultural humility lens of I am not an expert, not a but I am an advocate, and that's where this is coming from today. This is really meant for people who are super new to the topic and going over some elementary terms to how to start having this conversation, how to build more inclusive spaces. So Amanda, if you want to go to the next slide. So I'm going to start again at the beginning. So gender and sexuality, y'all, it is not the same thing. We talk about these in the same breath sometimes. We say LGBTQ+. And what more often we mean than not is LGBT plus with sexual orientation. And a lot of the times we leave out the gender component of that conversation. And today we're really focusing on gender. While there is some overlap in community, it is a different identity. And one does not predict the other. So I like to start there, kind of broad picture, and we'll work our way down. Next one for me, Amanda. So just a small question. What is gender? It's actually not. It's incredibly difficult to define because it's socially constructed. It's different for every culture, every person, every group. And when we talk about gender, it's important to know off the bat, gender and sex assigned at birth are not the same. Sex assigned at birth is when you are born and you come out and a doctor looks at you and says, oh, girl or boy, and they wrap you in a pink towel or a blue towel and they tell you what your gender is supposed to be the rest of your existence. And it doesn't always work out that way. Gender is kind of talked about in two realms. So gender expression is how we show the world our gender. It's how we perform it. And this is really stereotypical, but think about what we choose to wear, if we choose to wear makeup or not, and what that means, our names, our pronouns, all that stuff external to us. That is gender expression and what we're trying to show the world. Gender identity is in your head. It's what's in your brain. It's how you see yourself, your own relationship to gender, and how those things all come together creates gender, which is how we perform gender in society. So again, sex assigned at birth and gender are two different things, and I want to make sure to parse those out right from the get-go. Some really kind of start point definitions. Cisgender means that you're sex assigned at birth and your gender match. So for me, I was born, doctor came out wrapped in pink, that's a girl, that makes sense for me. My sex assigned at birth and my gender makes sense, I'm cisgender. Transgender is when your sex assigned at birth and your gender don't necessarily align all of the time. So it's not cisgender, it's transgender. Non-binary is something that it's an umbrella term. Both transgender and non-binary are umbrella terms. And what I mean by that is that there's lots of ways, lots of identities under transgender or non-binary. But non-binary typically means that you're neither male nor female, clearly, as defined by those binary terms. It's something else, non-binary. And I like to start really broad that way because unfortunately we're just not going to have enough time to go through every identity and every label or lack of label and what exactly that might mean. But I want to make sure that we can have this conversation with those words understood. so we can talk about why it's relevant to us as professionals. A lot of us in the room today are either working at the university, student-facing, client-facing, or will be one day, and it's important that we start educating ourselves on how gender identity comes up in these roles and how we can be good advocates and good accomplices when we get to those positions of power. So let's go on to the next one, Amanda. So personal gender pronouns, we are going to throw back to 2nd or 3rd grade. What is a pronoun? So a pronoun or a set of pronouns is how an individual would like others to refer to them or when talking about them. Some of the most common gender specific pronouns, we all know them, are she, her, hers, or he, him, his. So for example, she is talking at me right today. I came here to listen to her, right? Pronouns. Some less gender specific pronouns are they, them, theirs. So they are my friend. I went out to dinner with them last night. They, them, theirs. There's also, and you can see it sometimes, she, they, or he, they, and these are just some examples of less gender specific pronouns. And what those typically mean is that people would like to be referred to by both she and they. So use both. For example, she is my friend and I went out to dinner with them last night. See how that works? You just use both. So let's go to the next slide. And while it's switching, I'll say we won't go over all of these today, but I want to give space to the fact that those are a very small sample of what pronouns exist and what pronouns people identify with and use. This is all going to be recorded so you can look at these and do a little more research into them, but I wanted to make sure to just recognize that this is a small sampling of pronouns. And we can go on. So what do we do, right? So we know what this is. What do we do with it? And this is really a start point. I'll give you guys a hint that our discussion question is, what can you do to use this information? And I'm going to walk through some examples to get the conversation started. So the first one is set an example, especially when you are in a position of privilege or a position of power. When I'm a teacher, when I'm a counselor, when I'm a presenter, I introduce myself with my pronouns. My name is Melanie Miller, my pronouns are she, her, and then I keep going. The other part of that is to ask other people their personal pronouns. So hi, my name is Melanie Miller, my pronouns are she, her. What's your name and pronouns? This is, you see a lot in the classroom setting when we're first doing introductions, just asking people what their pronouns are. And I'm gonna give some caveats because I see it happen all the time and I'm sure y'all have too. Let's not just ask people of the LGBTQ+ community what their pronouns are. And I say that acronym, LGBTQ+, specifically because I'm not just talking about people who might be trans or non-conforming or non-binary. People in like this community on the whole get this question of what are you? And that's nasty and that's targeting. So we don't want to out people. We don't want to only ask the person in the room who you don't think you can tell what their pronouns are. Ask everybody. We don't want someone to feel spotlighted or like they have to come out to you because people don't owe you their gender expression. They don't owe you their gender identity. As the person in power, it's important we set the table for the conversation of pronouns, but we're never going to force someone to give it to us because we never know if it's a comfort or a safety issue. I come back to the example of me teaching a class and I ask everyone their pronouns and not everyone tells them to me. And I find out later that someone uses non-gender specific pronouns and they didn't really want to be known as that kid in class who's different. They don't want to have to teach everyone about their gender all of the time. They don't want to have to be out and that's entirely fair. They don't owe that to anybody. And so I want to caveat this of set the example when you are safe and comfortable yourself, and I am because I'm a cisgendered woman, but that's not always going to be true. So that balance of comfort versus safety or moaning for yourself and for other people. So move on to the next one. So what else do? We make good evidence-based choices, and I say good kind of sarcastically because not all research is good. I know we're in a university setting and we really value making good evidence-based choices, then let's have inclusive standards for research. Let's look at how we are including gender and how we're talking about gender in our research. And when we're building out evidence-based practices, let's really dive in and think critically of how we do this, both as a researcher and as a consumer of researcher. So for example, next time you take a survey, are they asking you if you are male, female, or other? Are they quite literally othering you when you are reading a research article? Look at that demographic section. How do they break it down? Are they inclusive with their language? Things like that. Start thinking about it when you're being a critical consumer of research, or a researcher yourself, depending on what your role is. Another big one is to try to not use gender-specific language before you know someone's gender. One of the things that I know at the university setting I'm conscious of is trying to move away from honorifics before I know someone. So it's really easy to send a student an email that I've never met and look at their name and assume their gender and say, hi, Miss whoever. I'm assuming gender before I even know that person through an honorific in an email, and we shouldn't be doing that. Some of my favorite non-gendered language is folks. It's non-gendered to begin with, and you'll see folks with an X now too, which is designed to be a little more inclusive and a sign of that inclusivity. My personal favorite is y'all, just because I'm from Tennessee and it sounds natural coming out of my mouth. So that's some other good ones. Start thinking about what language we gender for no real reason other than that's a colloquialism, and start finding more non-gendered language to use. We can go to the next one. Another big one is making space for personal pronouns and gender. These are a little more geared towards our online life right now in the middle of this pandemic, but wherever we can and wherever we're safe, making pronouns visible. Our Zoom names are a really very visible way to do that, to start normalizing sharing pronouns when you meet someone. And I say Teams, ugh, and it might get me in trouble, but has anyone else noticed that you can't change your name on Teams? We can't add our pronouns, we can't change our names. And I think about how that's going to be impacting students as our university makes more and more of a push to get on Teams. I spent probably 2 hours trying to change my name, and you actually have to go through IT administration, get approval, and change your name. So if someone knows something else that I don't know, please stop in and let me know. But I think about my students whose name assigned at birth is not the name they go by, or whose gendered name is not appropriate for their gender. All of these things, that it takes away autonomy from people, and we have to think about that. Thinking of other places to make pronouns visible, email signatures, and Amanda is going to walk through some fabulous examples of these later. Business cards, anytime you're in a leadership position, these are the times to use your privilege to normalize pronouns and normalize the conversation and intentionality around gender. And another good one is, especially in the university setting, making sure your intake forms include places for pronouns, so we are not making assumptions based off of students' names, because it happens all the time and we are not right all the time. You cannot tell gender by looking at someone. You can't tell pronouns either. And the last one I'll leave with is just be humble. stay humble. Cultural humility is not a checkbox. It's a journey throughout all of life. And when you hurt someone, listen, them sharing that pain or that correction, it's a gift. Someone correcting you, that's a gift. And making sure to apologize and learn from it is the biggest step. The last thing, and Amanda's going to put these down in the chat as well, is just continuing education. Again, this is really designed to be kind of an introduction to some of these terms and some takeaways, or we can start making our environments a little more inclusive. And these resources that I pulled are geared towards career counseling, and transgender employment. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt because we're coming over from the Career Center, but there's a lot of really awesome resources out there. And then I also have this one for what are personal pronouns, because it's not obvious to a lot of people, and it's a really great link to really break it down on what this is and why it's included in email signatures now. And I'm gonna switch over to Amanda.
Thanks so much, Melanie. Great job with your content. Last year when Melanie was working in the office, and I've continued to work with her even when she's no longer employed on our team because I love working with Melanie. Um, this is an area that she saw as an area of growth for our department. And we were able to take, sometimes tough conversations about inclusivity that we'd have in supervision and really use the tools and resources that she's so knowledgeable about to create a more inclusive environment for alumni that we're serving in career services. So here are just a few examples of ways that we've taken this content, personalized it for our audience, and some good notes for you to take for how you might do that as well. Also, a humble brag on Melanie too. Last week, we had an article published on this topic with the National Career Development Association, talking about how we could do this further as career practitioners. So very proud of her for that. Okay, so just a few notes from Alumni Career Services, a few examples. So you can pop your pronouns onto your email signature. A good best practice that Melanie's taught me is, do you notice that like what's this that's hyperlinked? That's actually hyperlinked to the first link that I shared with the resources, the mypronouns.org. And if you haven't poked around on that website, it's certainly worth your time. It's a good general overview for folks just wondering what they could be. Now, you could certainly put your pronouns right after your name too, or later in your email signature, but popping them on your email signature is a way that, I mean, it probably takes about 30 seconds to update your email signature on there, and that's a way that you can increase that welcomeness to all genders. Another one is to set up your Zoom defaults. Like Melanie was saying, we haven't figured out a way to do this on Microsoft Teams. And if anyone in the IT group, I know there's a couple IT experts in the conference, if you know how to do that, please put it in the chat. We want to learn how to do that as well. But on the Zoom defaults, if you go to uky.zoom.us, if you go to like the web address version and you go into your profile and where you see your image or where you see you can upload a photo, over on the right hand side, you'll see this edit button in blue. You can add your pronouns. You can add and customize your name to auto populate in Zoom however you like. So I would recommend adding in your personal pronouns after your name. I always think it's a good idea to include your department too. We do a lot in Alumni Career Services. We do a lot of presenting externally to UK. So we keep our department name and the university within our Zoom link so that we don't have to go in and rename ourselves in the participant list each time. It's just automatically populated. It's nothing that costs me time in a Zoom meeting, but to someone who's watching for those types of those triggers, it means the world to them, I'm sure. All right, a few other examples, your LinkedIn profile. You're certainly welcome to add your pronouns to the top under your name on your LinkedIn profile. And I'm not sure if you all have noticed this, but I've noticed more and more higher education professionals, we're ahead on the trend on this. Higher education professionals are more likely to do this. Human resources professionals are starting to do it too. And it's a trend that needs to continue to promote inclusivity. So add that one to your list. A few others that you might consider. Other ways that you can create an inclusive environment, putting a sticker on your water bottle or on your backpack or a sign in your office. I know many of you are working from home, so thinking about ways that you can create inclusivity using your virtual backgrounds, or if you're in a home office, how you might use a prop behind you to show inclusivity as well. Another example that we were able to implement in Alumni Career Services is considering our intake form. So anytime that I meet with an alumni for career counseling, we ask them to fill out this intake form, and we added personal pronouns along with the mypronouns.org link to that. So I would challenge you, and I'm going to challenge you in just a second, so be prepping for that, to think about in your audience who you serve and how you ask for demographic types of information. Anytime you're asking someone for their name, it's likely appropriate to ask them for their personal pronouns too. Okay, so here's our challenge. I'm curious, Melanie, you're welcome to unmute and do this with me in the chat. You want to talk a little bit about the flag before we do the challenge?
Oh, sure. So this is the progressive LGBTQ plus flag. We were looking for a background, and I wanted to make sure that we had that progressive one because, again, within the community, the T gets lost in a lot of the resources that are built, the research that's being funded, the rights that are being fought for. And while it's absolutely there, it's not as visible sexuality. And so this flag is meant to show that, along with some of the lines around how different identities intersect with gender as well. What it means to be a white trans woman is different than what it means to be a black trans woman, for example. So I really like this flag and wanted to make sure it was included while we challenge you guys. So Amanda, I don't know that we actually have it up here, but the overall question, and we want to open the dialogue. I know there's a lot of us here today, so it might be hard to have an entire conversation with y'all, but we want to save some space for what are people thinking, what are reactions, what are questions, and how might you be able to implement some of these inclusivity practices into the spaces y'all are in.
Melanie, you already have a question in the chat. So as we're going forward, I'm going to pass questions to the chat to Melanie, and I'm happy to address some too. Also in the chat, what's your homework from our session? How are you going to create a more inclusive environment as well? Okay, so the question for you, Melanie, is someone told this person that pronouns aren't preferred, they just are what they are. What would you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things we want to be really intentional with language. I think for me, preferred comes across like it's almost demeaning, like, oh, that's just your preference. No, my sweater is my preference. My pronouns are my gender expression. And so that's why there's that movement to say personal pronouns or just pronouns, if we don't want to have some sort of specifier for it, because it's not, well, I mean, yes, it is a preference not to get misgendered. It's more an identity piece and less of a casual preference. Hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Certainly open to further questions on that. What were you saying, Melanie? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm looking in the chat as well, and where you can get that flag. I actually have some stickers and things that I got off Etsy. Amanda and I found this on Google search, Google Images.
All right, so we're watching the chat. How are you going to take this information and apply it into your workplace? How can you create a more inclusive environment? Oh, thanks, Sarah. That's a good tip for the Google search. Valerie's saying, what I see more often is two pronouns, such as she, her. So is three preferred as in she, her, hers? You want to talk about the difference?
Yeah, so my understanding of it is it's grammar, and I am not, I'll be very transparent here. Grammar is not my strong suit. So if anyone else on the audience lets me know, my understanding is that there's 3 different tenses of pronouns. And there's technically you as well, which is a pronoun that's non-gendered and can be applied to anybody. So she, her is just condensed to shorten it from my understanding, but technically the 3 different parts of there. Just not
Sorry, Melanie. I think we have someone off mute. Let me see if I can find it. You keep going.
Oh, no, that's okay. No, I just wanted to see if someone was jumping in. Sorry, I'm trying to keep up.
I know it's going to be interesting to keep up with the chat. Okay, so Faith is saying that she has some stickers in the office, and she's saying that there's some great backgrounds on Canva for those that are interested in looking at virtual backgrounds. That's a great tip that we could add to our list for the future too. Thanks, Faith. That's a good one.
And I also see someone down here talking about, as a cisgender woman trying to be an example, if a cisgender woman is willing to use both she and they, is that more inclusive? So I can see the intent behind that, and I also think that it doesn't have the impact that you would think, because some people actually have she, they pronouns, meaning that they use both. So that's different than a sign of advocacy or allyship or anything like that. So I would steer away from that, because it's taking someone's actual pronouns and using it as almost like a sign for something else. And that gets really confusing and can really marginalize an already marginalized identity. Hope that answers the question. I hope I understood that correctly.
how I understood it too, Melanie. You did a great job
Oh,
with
and
it.
I see someone else with the first person, second person, and third person pronoun. Thank you for, those are the words I'm looking for. So thank you for that. I appreciate the support here.
Okay, Jennifer has a good question for you here, Melanie. She teaches in a class on interpersonal relationships. She's looking to incorporate more information about transgender relationships with family, friends, romantic partners. Do you know about any good resources that she might check out?
Yeah, I know there's some really wonderful work being put out by people who specifically study romantic relationship communication right now. I don't have any citations offhand, but I know I was just looking at it because I have it on my Google Scholar alerts. I would recommend, kind of as a start point, of getting on Google Scholar and setting up alert for those words specifically. But unfortunately, I don't have any articles at the tip of my fingers right now.
Kirsten on here is asking to see the email signature slide again, so I've just toggled over to that one. All right, watching for any other questions or homework.
And also, what I like about the example that Amanda has up here is this little "what's this" link to more resources. I think it serves as a really good opportunity for, if someone is curious and if someone is wanting to learn more about this, they don't have to dig for that information. It's right there. And so I really like that practice and do it myself.
We also incorporated that on the intake form. And even last night when we were reviewing the slides again in preparation, Melanie let me know that preferred pronouns is even a little dated since last year. It just needs to say personal pronouns, not preferred. And so that's an update that I'll continue to make on those. But right below it, we have see mypronouns.org for more information. So even if someone doesn't need that information or doesn't, I don't care. Maybe they don't care. They can pass through it. It's not required. Passing by information, I think, is still really valuable so that they can be more aware.
Yeah, and I really like on the Alumni Career Services intake form how you see those little asterisks. I know it's really small, but that means it's required, and the pronoun is not required. And I like that because for the people who have like less common pronouns or get misgendered, they're much more likely to be thankful. They know what that box is. And for someone, and I've been on the other end of the intake forms, we'll get Mr., we'll get silly things sometimes or not quite what we're looking for. That's still information for us, but it's a nice way to make space for it. I also see someone in the chat talking about struggling to override the use of sir and ma'am. And look, I'm with you. I was born and raised in Tennessee, and it was very much beat into me that those honorifics are a really big part culturally for me, especially around sir and ma'am. And it's not easy. It's almost reflexive with our language, and it's a matter of that humility of catching yourself and in the moment checking it as fast as possible. So just saying sir or ma'am, and you catch it and just go, oh, actually, I mean, what, like, whatever, like, correct yourself when it happens. And over time, your language is a muscle just like anything else, and it builds. So we have to let it build over time.
I've heard it also in like introducing a program like Welcome Ladies and Gentlemen, where
Mm-hmm.
you can just say welcome. Just
Yeah.
welcome everybody.
Welcome or welcome, and there's some really neat lists out there too to help. So I know I follow a bunch of stuff on Instagram, for example, and you'll see it all the time with suggestions on what to call groups of people that isn't gendered.